are we going to see a red wave tomorrow? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, happy Monday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you live from our Stratus IP studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. Don't let cyber attacks or outdated business technology put your company at risk. Go get your one-on-one free business technology consultation, that is, today over at briannicholsshow.com/Stratus IP. Stratus IP, business technology simplified. Folks, thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to digging into, yes, the midterm elections. We're seeing state elections. We're seeing federal elections across the United States right now. It's seemingly going to be a red wave, and we're excited to dig into that. We have a returning guest joining us to discuss all that and more. But first, before we talk about a red wave, well, what about the idea of maybe a gold wave? Is that possible? Okay, well, maybe if it's not necessarily possible, it is still something that is being discussed up in Illinois, and that is where we have one of our sponsors joining us today, and that is Scott Schluter for governor up in Illinois. Now, folks, if you are up in Illinois, please go ahead on your ballot and check out Scott Schluter. He is an Air Force veteran, diesel mechanic, and longtime libertarian activist, running with his running mate, John Phillips, who are two mechanics running to fix the broken state of Illinois. Scott wants to bring the principles of individual liberty and responsibility to Illinois governance with the message of compassion and cooperation. If you're in Illinois, that is, vote for Scott Schluter November 8th, 2022, tomorrow. My goodness, right around the corner. All right, folks. So, I mentioned we have a returning guest onto the show today, helping me break down what's going to be happening here in these elections. Returning to the program, Mahgdalen Rose. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you back. I know we've been having a couple technical issues here with some connectivity, so fair warning to the audience. We're going to make it work, though. Mahgdalen, you've been busy. What's been going on in your world since you were last on the program?
Well, since I was last in the program, I've been doing debate prep services for candidates across the country. So this election cycle, I've been really plugged in on what voters want to know in town halls and forums and interviews. And one thing I've seen is that there's really a focus on local issues. So it's some candidates that I've been working with in Oregon. Voters are really holding politicians or potential politicians accountable and asking them, how are you going to solve our local issues? Because they have no faith that they're going to be solved at the federal level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when we've been hearing this with all of our different candidates we've had in the program, from local, state, and heck, even some federal candidates as well. But there has been a resurgence to, you mentioned it, the local, the return to people wanting to see politics, responding to them, actually listening to them, and their politicians actually having to go and earn their votes. And this seems like the first election I've seen in recent memory. It seems like a lot of politicians are out there actually getting a lot of folks excited to go to the polls, and that hasn't really seemed to be the case in recent years. And it seems like right now, a lot of that momentum, Mahgdalen, is on the GOP side. And in particular, there's two races I know you wanted to focus on, you're in PA right now, but also there's an interesting microcosm of a red wave possibly taking place in a very, very blue state like New York. So let's start with PA and talk about the U.S. Senate race. We have John Fetterman, current lieutenant governor, and then Mehmet Oz, celebrity TV show talk host, now politician, hoping to be the next U.S. senator from Pennsylvania. So talk to us, Mahgdalen. What is it about the Pennsylvania race that has you so interested?
Well, it's the fact that John Fetterman, if he had not had a stroke and was physically at the level he has been in the past, if that was the case, he would be the person ready to win. There would be no question about him winning. And instead, we've gotten to the situation where Dr. Oz, somebody who has no political experience outside of being involved on a fundraiser level and being active with Trump, he's beginning to eclipse John Fetterman. And the real turn point in this race was the debate And as someone in Pennsylvania, I can tell you the day after that debate, you saw more Oz signs and more talk about the positives of Oz on local television than you had seen for the months prior. The Republican primary to get the Republican nominee for Senate in Pennsylvania was bloody. It was nasty. It was contentious. And there was a real question of whether or not Oz was even going to win it. After he won it, there was an idea with everyone was going to, it didn't really happen in stages. It fascinates me about whether or not Oz will be able to pull out the end of this race and eclipse Fetterman, because Fetterman has such a hometown advantage.
We lost you for a little bit there, Morgan, but Magdalene, but we got most of the message there. That was good. But hey, no, I definitely hear you. There is the hometown advantage that I think people have been kind of waiting to see. Is it going to come out? There was a new ad that was just done with Fetterman. I don't know if you saw this, pretending to be Mean Joe Green from back at the Steelers, and it was just so cringy. I understand that he's trying to play to that hometown feel, but the guy, I mean, he is a shell of his former self, and that's. Truly, I mean, like from a human standpoint, that's awful. It's sad. Like to see somebody who is quite obviously still dealing with the aftermath effects of a stroke. Yeah, it makes one on an empathetic level feel for the guy, but that's like, well, you have the opportunity to not do this. And actually, he still ran despite being in a primary back in May. I don't know, Magdalene. I think Pennsylvania is going to be a very interesting state to watch, especially with someone like Mehmet Oz, who, I mean, goodness, he's not even a great Republican by any stretch of the imagination. He can still win though. And I guess I look at the GOP. Why didn't we go with a more, I guess, libertarian conservative candidate over Mehmet Oz?
Well, because Trump endorsed Mehmet Oz, and really that's what it came down to. And while Trump doesn't win over all voters in Pennsylvania, he definitely has a foothold here. And one of the things a lot of people have been questioning, and I've been questioning this as well, is if John Fetterman were to win this seat, there's not going to be the effort there has been so far to make John Fetterman comfortable and to help him along with the closed captioning and the assistance and the slowing down of conversations. That's not going to happen on the Senate floor. Mitch McConnell is not going to pull punches, and he shouldn't, because if you are running for U.S. Senate and the voters find you fit to serve in office, you have to be able to keep up. So there is a question of amongst Democrats in Pennsylvania whether or not it's worth it to send John Fetterman to the Senate when they know that Mitch McConnell and even fellow Democrats are not going to hold his hand in the way that Pennsylvania Democrats in the political spectrum have held his hand during this entire race.
All right, Magdalene. Well, let's turn things up to a little bit north of the border, and that is up in New York. Now, anybody who is familiar with New York politics, I'll start things off. It's gross. New York politics is one of the most corrupt, backwards political systems in the entire United States, and the success of the state, or lack thereof, speaks to that. And you saw Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul take over the reins of one Governor Andrew Cuomo, who took the reins of his father, Mario Cuomo. So now we've had decades and decades of Cuomos and more or less Democratic politicos who have been pushed into positions of power. Now, Kathy Hochul, much like her predecessor, was having no issues whatsoever in masking your children, asking you to send your kids to school with masks over their face while she and other adults could go ahead and not have masks on, despite the fact that all the science before the pandemic about masking said that masks really were ineffective in trying to stop a respiratory virus. Am I allowed to say that now, Magdalene? Will I get canceled for speaking what folks are now acknowledging is common sense epidemiological fact? And yet here we are. We spent 2.5 years promoting this nonsense with folks like Kathy Hochul leading the charge up in New York. Well, surprise, surprise. Now we have a situation where the GOP candidate in deep blue, and I say deep blue, New York State, the GOP candidate in Lee Zeldin is actually fighting towards winning this seat in the recent polls, not just showing him within the margin of error, but I think in the most recent poll, Magdalene, correct me if I'm wrong, he's actually leading. Is that correct?
He has been leading. And what's interesting about Lee Zeldin is that he's running against a woman who's never been elected to the office she's holding. And that's always so dangerous. In my opinion, when you are a governor or senator, anyone, and you've been appointed, or you're the person interviews resign, like in the case of Cuomo, you should really be a quiet politician because the voters have not entrusted you with this position. You are there. And Kathy is out front. She does not have high rankings, and that is something she has not even tried to fix. So Lee Zeldin has come in as this sort of quiet candidate and really started to eclipse her campaign and make Republicans, independents, and Democrats within New York remember that New York has problems outside of just the federal issues everyone likes to talk about to get lots of clicks. Andrew Cuomo had kept the focus so much on federal issues and his fights with Trump that so many New Yorkers had not had the time or even the ability to think about the fact that New York is in real danger of becoming a city that's unlivable, especially when it comes to crimes. Lee Zeldin's strategy of making New York politics locally is paying off for him.
And New York, so for folks who are unfamiliar with New York politics, I think it's important to give them a little context, right? So New York State, imagine New York, it looks like a giant boot, right? So pretty much where like the heel of the boot would be, that's New York City, right? Long Island, New York City. And beyond that area, outside of that area in New York, you go to the entire rest of the boot. Everywhere else, excluding a few cities here and there, is actually very red. But because the population density in the greater New York City and surrounding suburbs is so intense and so deep blue, it always swings the state that direction. So all it really took and all it really we needed in New York was kind of this, and you mentioned Lee Zeldin being squishy, but like it is this kind of George Pataki-like state, right? The Republicans in New York, they're not your libertarian conservative, rah-rah folk like we're used to. However, there was such an energy right now because of the response to not just what Kathy Hochul has been doing, but also just across the board, the Democrats locally in New York State who reacted so insanely with the COVID policies across the board. And I think that's going to be the also that sweeping reason why so many folks are motivated to go out and not just vote in this election, but actively vote out those people who brought on this harm. We have folks like Kathy Hochul. We have Governor Gretchen Whitmer up in Michigan. We have we have senators across the United States who are facing re-election in the Democratic camp who are now facing uphill battles, like Mark Kelly down in Arizona, or you go up Arizona, or you go up to New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan, who many thought was going to be a really safe seat, now in the swing red to Don Bolduc. So you're seeing consistently a lot. I mean, heck, Doug Mastriano in PA, that one blew me away. That he's even putting up a really big fight against Josh Shapiro. So Magdalene, I mean, the local politics approach, and this is something we've been focusing on here at the Brian Nichols Show. It wins because then you can meet people where they're at on the issues they care about and show that there's a tangible way to address those issues versus what folks are so used to, the politician coming in, shaking hands, kissing a few babies, telling you that they're going to save the world and end world poverty and hunger, and then you never hear from them again. Oh, wait, until it is the next election. Now, folks are seeing there might actually be a path forward.
They are, and I think that comes down to Americans becoming quite cynical. They know that no one is going to change the world. They know that we're in deep problems when it comes to Ukraine, specifically because of our now economic tie to Ukraine, how much support we've given them. They know that their states are struggling, that there's a supply chain crisis, that there was a gas crisis. I don't believe that Joe Biden has solved that crisis, but it's made it a bit. So American vote. They're angry, but they have this that is going on, and it's something Democrats have not been able to deal with because Democrats are these big picture hope people. It's the vote for change mentality of Barack Obama. It's the Jimmy Carter, everything will be fine idea. And American voters are going to the party that embraces them and really embraces the cynicism that they've had, which is that Joe Biden is not delivering. And even the local leaders in the Democrat level and even some Republican levels, they are so entrenched in DC politics, they're unable to fix local problems. You can't. One of the problems Democrats have had is that on a local level or statewide level, they can't solve problems because the federal level is going to come down on them, even just in a media war. So a Democrat, mayor or governor in New York cannot attack the issue of crime and fix it because the Joe Biden administration is going to hit them through their secretary and in the media. around what they're doing is racist or not in with Joe Biden. So Joe Biden has prohibited Democrats from making their own states better. And now you're seeing Republicans, independent and moderate voters run to the Republican side because they have a belief that at least Republicans do not have to be adherent to the Joe Biden philosophy of governance right now.
There we go. We caught it that time. All right, Magdalen. Well, hey, that's the context we wanted to get. And frankly, we're seeing right now a lot of other folks, they are having the conversation. Hey, you know what? I think I've never voted Republican before, but I think we're going to do it. I'm hearing this conversation across the board from friends. I mean, frankly, they were like, I always thought rah Democrats. And now all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I'm probably going to vote for Lee Zeldin. I'm like, what? Really? Okay.
It's a great turnaround.
Like, do your thing, right? Like, I'm all about it. But I guess at the end of the day, too, it requires us to actually see this turn into something, right? And this is, I guess, a message to Republicans now. You can't mess this up. Like,
no, don't mess this up.
Right. Like it requires to actually follow through on what you say you're going to do. And if you don't, understand what's going to happen. Like, what's the consequence to you not following through? It's the Democrats taking back control. It's 2 to 4 more years of this insanity. And frankly, I don't know if America can stick it up for that. Now, I don't want to go into the whole, this is the most important election of our lifetime rhetoric. But again, it does feel pretty darn important right now, especially with what we all just watched happen for 2.5 years. I think if you had told me in 2010, just like let's go back 12 long years ago, that in under 20, 30 years or so, I would be able to see a time when the government would be able to arbitrarily determine who was and was not determined to be an essential and non-essential employee, or who is determined to have employment status based on the vaccination status for a virus that we knew nothing about. In the vaccine, it was a brand new experimental vaccine on a technology that had never been tested in humans. If you had told me that, I would have said, where are you submitting this script for a movie to Hollywood? Because that's a really good script. And we all just lived through it, Magdalen. So I say that because, you know what? I used to think that the most important election of our lifetime rhetoric was getting old and kind of boring and didn't feel real. But now it kind of feels real. Now it's like, I lived it. That's why I moved from Philadelphia, because I saw the ramifications, how bad things were. So where do you think things are going to end up? Do you think Republicans are actually going to take this, if they do end up winning on Tuesday, and carry the torch forward and actually have some success electorally, but also turn that into political and policy success from a state, local, and fingers crossed, federal level as well?
Well, I think if they win the Senate, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion about them winning the House. They're going to win the House. But if they win the Senate, they will be in charge of the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. So that's a massive amount of power. The reality is they're probably not going to get any bills through. They're not going to get legislation signed into law. That's not what they need to do. What they need to do is check on Joe Biden's power. They need to be out front condemning most of the things he does that do not align with party platform or really with common sense. So the American people are not expecting Republicans to get legislation through. They're expecting Republicans to be the policing of the Joe Biden administration. That's a good position to be in, because Republicans are very good at opposition and keeping Democrats sort of down in terms of getting their policies through. Mitch McConnell is very good at that. He's able to make sure that Democrats don't have cohesive voting blocks, that they're not able to get through massive packages of legislation that isn't read. So when Mitch McConnell forward, aside from that, I would look at the Republican governors that win. Those are going to be the seats that have major power. Them being able to sign into legislation or pardon people or stop massive federal laws from being enacted within their states when they have the purview to do so. That's what voters are voting for. They're voting to stop Democrat governors that have been restrictive in their state, controlling in their state, and used COVID to have over the last few years.
All right, Magdalen. I think the voters here at the Brian Nichols Show, at least, they're on board. They hear it and they see it every single day. They go out. Things are more expensive. Things don't get into the grocery cart as much as they used to. Gas tank, it's costing a lot more than it used to back in the old days. So yeah, a lot of folks are looking to get some change. And it's funny because I remember back when I was younger, that was the rhetoric of the Democrats: hope, change, all that fun stuff. So with that being said, thank you for joining us. And I see we might be having some technical issues here. You never know. Technology is fun. I sell it, but I can't seem to get it to work well. So hopefully Magdalen's still here with us. But otherwise, with that being said, my final thoughts for today, folks. Yeah, there you are, Magdalen. You were glitching in and out, so we're glad you're still there. So my final thoughts for today: voters, you can't complain if you don't go out and vote. I know that sounds really like, okay, old man yells at cloud, but like truly stop the whole, silences or violence, and voting is impeding on people. Like, go out and actually vote. Like you because otherwise people are going to use the government against you. So it's on you to play defense at the very least. Yeah. But look at your vote as a vote for defense. Otherwise, go out and vote for something that you want to see change. Vote for politicians you can actually believe in from a local level. And if you don't see that, well, hey, maybe it's time for you to maybe look at getting involved. And if you want to get involved, there are folks out there like Morgan, or I keep saying Morgan, I'm thinking Right Strategies, which is our past sponsor, who's actually doing a lot of stuff that you're doing with the campaign work, helping candidates get their messages. So reach out to Morgan, our past sponsor, or reach out to Magdalen, who is doing a lot of this work as well. Magdalen, what are your final thoughts for today as we go into the election midterms 2022 here November 8th?
Well, I think Republicans will take the House. If they take the Senate, it will probably come down to Ohio and Pennsylvania. I think Georgia is probably this have for a sweep, but that may not happen. Raphael Warnock has so much on the ground support. I would just also advise people to vote for the ballot measures they want, because a lot of times people forget about those, and those can really make or break a state and the way that a state runs, and really empower voters to decide on major issues within their state that the governors don't have a role in. And something that I don't think enough Republicans or Democrats talk about is the importance of ballot measures, as well as the fact that Republicans really do need a majority here. So make sure that it's not a slim majority. If you're going to vote for a Republican, just vote Republican down ballot. Don't split your vote. It doesn't really help anybody. And you're not this idea of having both sides of the aisle govern. One side of the aisle has governed for 2 years, and we're kind of in a disaster on every measurable scale.
There you go, folks. Well, Magdalen, thank you for joining us, and thank you for you being able to fight through the technical issues. We made it through.
Of course.
And you know what? I think the reason we were able to still make it through is because my studio is all decked out for Christmas. Yeah, I know. I'm in the spirit, folks. What can I say? I got yeah, and you know what? I got some stuff hiding behind there you can't even see because I'm in the way. But no, I'm excited. No, thank you for joining me, Magdalen. It was really a great time to speak to you and obviously get your insights. And folks, if you got some value, well, please do me a favor. Go ahead and give today's episode a share. And when you do, go ahead and tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. Magdalen, where can folks go ahead and follow you to continue the conversation?
You can follow me on Twitter at Mahgdalen Rose, and go to the link in my Twitter bio for all the links to the rest of my social media. And make sure to send me any messages or questions you have after the show.
Awesome. All right, folks. I'll make it easy for you as well. I'll include all those links in the show notes. Head to BrianNicholsShow.com, where you can find today's episode, all 619 other episodes of the program. Plus, you can find the entire transcript if you want to go ahead and read along, because some of y'all do that. I know. I read the emails. Also, number 2, if you did not go ahead yet and subscribe to our video version of the program, well, there are 3 different spots you can do so. Number 1, you head to YouTube. Number 2, head to Rumble. Or number 3, head to Odyssey. Either way, just do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button in that little notification bell so you're not missing a single time a new video goes live. And yes, tomorrow it's going to be you and me, folks. I might have some special guests here and there to be determined. We're working on some schedules, but we're going to be talking about the elections, some of the expectations, some big surprises that we are expecting. Is it a surprise if you're expecting a surprise? Maybe it's like big guesses or big surprises that we might not expect. How about that? So other than that, please make sure you've done us a favor. Hit that magical subscribe button again so you're not missing a single time we join you. But with that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Mahgdalen Rose. We'll see you tomorrow.
For listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.